It's been nearly 10 years since Samsung shocked the photography industry by announcing the launch of the NX1, a flagship mirrorless camera way ahead of its time. In this video, we'll take a look back on Samsung's Concorde moment and discover just how good this camera actually was. This is Adventures in Aperture, and welcome to the very curious case of the Samsung NX1. So, the year is 2014, and while Canon and Nikon are releasing DSLRs like the 7D Mark II and the D750, Samsung meanwhile causes a stir by launching its flagship camera, the NX1. This camera would have a relatively short lifespan, as Samsung would exit the mainstream mirrorless camera business not long after. But when you hear just how good this camera was, you have to ask yourself why it wasn't more of a success. First up, let's talk about the sensor, which made headlines by being one of the first backside illuminated sensors on a mirrorless APS-C camera and offered a beefy resolution of 28 megapixels, which, let's face it, is still a decent figure a decade down the line. There was no optical low-pass filter, which resulted in sharper detail, and this resolution meant photographers could capture large file sizes, enough to create big prints at home. And the ISO range was decent too, expandable up to 51200. Now, it's worth remembering that this was Samsung's flagship mirrorless camera, and as such, the brand really pushed the boat out. In fact, the NX1 boasted a high level of weather sealing, making it suitable for outdoor use by professional photographers working in harsh conditions. The NX1 followed on for a number of earlier cameras, most notably the NX11. Now, the NX11 was an amazing APS-C mirrorless that served up 15 megapixels of resolution. I owned one myself, and I found it to be a great camera to just pick up and head out into the city with, thanks to its small dimensions and ease of use. Despite all the pro specifications packed into the NX1, the flagship camera was also compact and lightweight, tipping the scales at 550 grams without the battery. Remember, this was at a time when bulky DSLRs still ruled the roost, and smaller mirrorless cameras were still scrambling to gain traction and favour from often sceptical photographers. That said, those who wanted a sturdier hold could take advantage of the optional battery grip, which changed the NX1's form factor to make it look more like what you'd expect from a full-frame DSLR. At the heart of the NX1 was a powerful processor engine, and this power meant fast data transfer, enabling the NX1 to offer a rapid burst rate. In fact, the camera could shoot 15 frames per second, with a buffer allowing for over 30 raw images or 80 JPEGs. Now, by 2024 standards, yeah, that's fairly pedestrian, but for 2014, that was lightning quick. Backing up this fast burst rate was an amazing autofocus system that again was a way ahead of its time, offering users 205 phase detection points. 153 of them were the more sensitive cross-type sensor points. Photographers could line up scenes either via the high-resolution electronic viewfinder or by using the 3-inch touch-sensitive LCD, which offered a tilting design to help with low or high compositions. And you know what? Even the menu system was pretty cool and easy to navigate too, and even boasted some cool swipe-down smart moves that you typically find on a phone rather than a camera screen. And as even more proof of how exciting this camera was, the NX1 could shoot impressive video, topping out at 4K 30p internal recording, and videographers could also take advantage of a 120p slow motion mode at full HD. Focus peaking and zebra patterns were there too, all of which served to make the NX1 an interesting prospect for indie filmmakers who at the time were using cameras like the Panasonic GH4. There were also ports for headphones and a mic, so external audio could be both captured and monitored, and when recording to an external device via HDMI, the NX1 could capture 4K 422 8-bit footage. So there we go, an amazing camera and one that should have served as a real platform to build on. But there was a problem. Barely a year later, Samsung shifted its focus to image sensors and more smartphone camera technology, and eventually the NX1 was discontinued, with no real replacement ever forthcoming. One factor could have been the limited amount of lenses. When the NX1 was launched, it was joined by Samsung's two premium S lenses, the 50-150 f2.8 and the 16-50 f2 to 2.8, both were actually pretty amazing optics. That said, a number of third-party brands did sell lenses to fit the NX1, so there were optical options available. Another factor, and this is the brutal truth really, those years were just really bad for camera brands across the board. Everybody suffered. You know, it's sad that more photographers didn't get the chance to try out the NX1, and it's a real shame Samsung didn't stick with mirrorless cameras. They were doing a brilliant job. As the specifications demonstrate, a decade later, this was a fantastic camera, and the extra competition would have been good for the industry as a whole. But what do you think about the NX1? Please share your thoughts about the camera in the comments below, and as always, thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.